remove the stale, get rid of the stale air. Yes.
I recall growing up that houseplants were very popular. I'm not sure that we use them as much anymore.
To some extent. Some certain plants are classified as air purifying. Yes.
Would you give us a sense of what they are off the top of your head?
No, I'm not aware.
Okay, all right. So, but certainly where persons can get houseplants, you'd want to see them to continue to have that tradition where they can have them in the house to help as well too.
Yeah, and may I add as well on the issue of plants. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, what is called biophilic design. This is basically the incorporation of design and the outdoors into indoor environments, again, for a more holistic and a more balanced sort of well-being. So one of the things persons could take into consideration as well is the fact that we live in the tropics. We are surrounded by nature. If we are to design a house, as much as possible, we should try not just have plants on the inside, but as much as possible allow the indoor to interact with the outdoors, right? Consider small atriums, it goes a long way. And if I mentioned earlier that we do have Abby from Health and Wellness, and all of those actually tie in nicely because the quality of space is just as important as the space itself. Yeah?
Right, and also having increased ventilation would certainly help to reduce the heat.
Exactly.
That seems to be coming back here at this time. All right.
And just one more thing again. On the issue of inspections, I think you did a very good job in terms of persons identifying potential sources of moisture. Sometimes they can be very evasive, and it takes a bit of investigating, careful investigation to basically identify those sources of moisture penetration, whether it be in the roofs, whether it be in the walls, and we don't necessarily see much intrusion in the floors, but it happens as well. It does happen as well, and this moisture might be trapped at the tile level, and eventually we begin to see the marks through capillary action, basically moving upwards into the walls. So my advice would be to basically take a look, be very mindful of these hairline, we call them hairline cracks in the mortar, because eventually moisture would find itself.
And that's why it's so important to have contractors involved at this stage as well too.
Very important, very important.
Okay,
very important.
So we referred to the National Indoor Air Quality Dialogue that was held, and we want to discuss that a bit more, but we're going to take our first break.
Okay.
Stay with us, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus, and we're having a discussion on a topic that I think most persons don't really consider, and that's indoor air quality. But it's extremely important to your health, and that's a discussion that we're having here today. And we are having that discussion with two members of the task force designed to create a policy on indoor air quality. So as we jump back into the conversation, we mentioned earlier that, of course, a national dialogue on indoor air quality was held last year. It was actually October 23rd. Give us a sense of who participated in this forum and what were some of the key issues identified?
Okay, so we did have the appearances from the Ministry of Health, representation from the Ministry of Health, the Bureau of Standards, the Clean Company in the name of Mr. David Davison. I think he did a very good job in pointing homeowners specifically to areas in the home that sometimes are overlooked and where sometimes moisture sort of finds itself, specifically in areas under the sink, the corners of carpets, right? We also did have the presence of the SKNIS Institute of Architects, where I presented on sustainable design practices. Part of my presentation took a look at a case study of a residential structure, and also I think we looked at 2 commercial buildings, one out of Trinidad and another from St. Lucia. Also, we had the presence of the Development Control and Planning Board, and Mr. Ellis Hazel would have presented on the role of codes, right? And we do understand the importance of the adherence to the codes, because if adherence to the codes means that we have more wholesome development, and being more wholesome basically ties back into the whole idea of buildings being well situated so as not to obstruct the airflow from one building to the next, right? We also had a keynote speaker in the name of Mr. Steve Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker would have presented his presentation basically surrounded itself around data, specifically ambient air quality. This is something that I didn't speak about earlier, but I think it's unarguable that the quality of indoor environments, basically, it is directly related to the quality of the outdoor environments, the ambient environments. Yeah, because those particles are all around us, floating, and they await every single opportunity to basically infiltrate and find a home in our environments, right? So these were basically the speakers, but there was also an opportunity for the members of the public, those who tuned in virtually and those in attendance, to basically share a bit of, in some instances, their frustration, because we do know that, again, issues of indoor air quality, especially when it hinges on the existence of perhaps mold in an environment, it can be a little sensitive to deal with, right? Nevertheless, the dialogue was successful in that it provided us, like I said earlier, with that starting point. It was more of a situational analysis of what really obtains in St. Kitts, what are the troubling issues, and how we need to go forward, identifying these issues, and of course, addressing them.
Was it difficult to get stakeholders in the room? I appreciate that you were invited to present, but based on the sense that you would have gotten from persons during the interaction, during the presentations, was it difficult, or was there buy-in? Because of course you spoke earlier about getting the importance of that buy-in. Public buy-in is important, right, but also there must be stakeholder buy-in from the onset.
Well, I would say there was buy-in. I mean, the event was well attended. We saw both persons from the workforce. We saw students as well, which is very important. And might I add, one of the strategies that we're exploring with the policy would be to sort of engage the upcoming generation, right? So, for example, the whole idea of bringing the idea of indoor air quality for example, at CFBC, persons doing the ADT course, you know.
What's ADT?
The Architectural Design Studies.
Okay.
Right? So how do we program, how do we sort of align the upcoming generation, right, to begin to think of issues of indoor air quality, right? So I think it was successful in that regard, that we did capture the attention of quite a cross-section of persons in the audience. Of course, most persons are concerned about the event not necessarily being a mouthpiece, but of course something that would basically pay dividends, you know, down the road. And hence the reason why the task force is now in place, to basically provide a structured document that provides recommendation going forward.
Dr. Roland, were you a part of the dialogue at that time?
No, I was not.
No, okay. So, based on your interactions with the task force, now being a policy member, how would you rate the interaction there and the task force?
I think it's very interactive, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And as we speak to the issues that you mentioned that came out of the dialogue, mold, poor ventilation, and climate change, because that is something that we are constantly facing. Of course, the government is key to make aware persons of the challenges that climate change poses to us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and having a sustainable plan to address it. What are some of the most urgent indoor air quality challenges in St. Kitts and Nevis at this time?
Well, I would say, based on the interactions with the public, and obviously some of the reports in the Federation, I think the issue of mold is one of the most significant issues that occupies the minds of individuals, and of such, it actually legitimizes the whole idea of putting this draft policy in place, yeah, because we have agreed that there is a problem, and there is an actionable solution underway to basically address some of these issues. But to answer your question, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, mold seem to be one of the most pressing issues. Again, not unique to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I have seen complaints around the Caribbean as well, St. Lucia, where I'm from. Again, we share the same tropical climate. The issues are very similar. We crave a cooler indoor environment. Most persons can't live without AC units. The AC unit itself can present a significant challenge as well, because we need to deal with the humidity, we need to deal with the moisture, right? So it's definitely, like I said, one of the most significant issues confronting us.
And Dr. Roland, from a health perspective, are we seeing these issues pop up? How concerned should we be with relation to mold and ventilation?
Okay, well, seeing that I'm stationed in the AR, I don't really deal with much of those issues. I can't really speak to what presents to the communities. But in terms of the AR, other than the example I gave with the asthmatics, if there's, burning of cane fields or road construction, not really much.
Okay. So what steps are being taken now to address these challenges that was identified in the policy report? That's the role of the task force.
Well, we still at the incubation stages, but I think one of the most important things would basically be for us to prioritize the public engagement and sensitization, even before we get the entire document together. I think there are best practices, there are best international practices, and stuff that we are aware of. We don't necessarily practice them on a daily basis. I think we would need to sort of zoom in and sort of remind individuals of some of the actionable items that can basically be looked at to counteract issues of indoor air quality.
And the task force, is there collaboration now? Because of course, as you mentioned, you're an architect,
right?
And you're the president for the association. Is there collaboration between architects and builders to promote climate resilient, low emission construction practices? Because this falls into, of course, the government's strategy of transforming St. Kitts and Nevis into a sustainable island state. So
currently, we don't necessarily have any formal agreements and formal understandings between the Institute of Architects and the Contractors Association. A few years ago, I served as the vice president of said institute, and one of the agenda items would have been to sort of reinforce our alliances, with third-party practitioners, including contractors. I do think there is room for improvement. I think that we need to sort of sit around one table so that we can sort of help support each other, right? We, as architects, we are heavily involved in the design and planning stages. The contractors execute, but at some point, I think we complement each other nicely, and we should basically be supporting each other in order to basically provide more sustainable and resilient design solutions for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
And Dr. Roland, based on where you work in terms of the ER, and you mentioned that, of course, that you don't necessarily deal with cases that it's related to mold, unless, of course, there is some sort of an emergency with an asthmatic person or stuff like that. But Is there that collaboration between the doctors and the emergency room where the information is collated, where perhaps more persons come in with asthmatic cases, or asthmatic attacks, I think they're called, or other respiratory or other type of illnesses that may be caused by air pollutants, that information is collated and passed up, that possibly indicates that this might be warrant of further attention?
Yes, actually. All charts are reviewed and the information is collected, statistical data, everything, and it's passed on.
Are there early warning signs that someone's health might be affected by poor indoor air quality that we should look for?
Well, yes, there are general signs, but I must say it's not just the signs, it's more like a combination of the signs, a pattern, and they exist without any clear cause. For example, drowsiness, nausea, difficulty breathing, worsening asthmatic conditions, irritation to the eyes, the ears, irritation to the eyes, the nose, and the throat as well. Persons may have frequent headaches, skin dryness, irritation. However, these symptoms, these signs can also be a cause of other conditions. Hence why I said it's a pattern where, for example, you're in a particular environment, you experience these symptoms, these signs, but when you leave, you start to feel better. Also patterns in that there are a few people, there are a group of people that are experiencing similar signs as well, okay? And once again, just to emphasize, without a clear cause, in that there is nothing else that could cause those. For example, if your blood pressure is high or your blood sugar is high, you can have headaches, if you understand where I'm coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what are the long-term health risks now of poor indoor air quality, especially for vulnerable groups such as children, persons who have a disability, the elderly, those type of categories of persons?
Okay. In terms of children, children can have developmental effects. Their concentration can be reduced, therefore their learning ability can be affected, and those with asthmatics would have worsening. The asthma condition can be worsened. In terms of elderly, long-term exposure may increase the risk of dementia, and there may be a mental decline. Also, it increases their risk. They have a higher risk of developing heart and lung diseases as well. Now, persons where you have vulnerable, more vulnerable populations like respiratory ailments, the pollutants can actually weaken the lung defenses. Hence, you have an increased risk of lung infections. And these persons with respiratory ailments, they are sensitive to these pollutants. Hence, they're prone to infections as well. And also we can include persons with weakened immune systems, such as cancer patients, patients living with HIV.
And so what's your advice for persons, especially for those who are dealing with persons with cancer cases, of course, with their retirement homes and stuff, to help to improve the indoor air quality?
Yes, as we said before, routine, regular cleaning, monitoring those with the air conditioning units, keep a maintenance schedule as well. Yeah.
Okay. Let me bring you back into Mr. Fassale and talk to us a bit more about the issue that we discussed, climate change. I touched on it earlier. How is it exacerbating indoor air quality issues in our tropical climate, and what specific adaptations like dehumidification, because of course you mentioned humidifiers earlier, that's something that I think most persons don't consider down here. We hear about it in the United States, of course, they have the change in weather patterns, but stuff like that, or storm-resistant building codes, how are they being prioritized?
Well, I will start with the latter. I think we do have a very robust building code, and I think you've probably heard it already. The construction practices in St. Kitts and Nevis rank one of the highest in the region. We do have a very resilient building crop. So yeah, the other issue is, as you spoke about climate change, I mentioned earlier the whole idea of the global warming and the need for individuals to seek a cooler place to live, right? And those basically present some challenge. Why I have seen persons here, you've seen institutions, basically not necessarily homes, although I have seen it in homes, where persons would use the dehumidifiers. But it is not very common, it's not very popular in, you know, in St. Kitts and Nevis. What I would also say, as a recommendation, something that I know would emanate from the draft policy, in the advent of technology, I think there is room for us to sort of prioritize and implement sensors, smart sensors, that basically track the quality of the interior spaces, right? So this is one of the ways I think we can, in small measure, look at adaptation. We need to understand where we are in order to basically effectively treat the spaces that we occupy. So that being said, I think at the least, we should be able to understand the quality of the indoor environments that we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. And you actually just touched on the next question that popped to mind when you were talking in terms of the ability to test indoor air quality, because if we are telling persons and employers, of course, that the indoor air quality is important and it could be a public health risk, then there must be a way to identify what those issues are.
Correct. And if we go back to the list of objectives earlier, the draft policy seeks to basically bring and harmonize. So there are quite a bit of recommendations, I mean, all around the world. The idea would be for us to sort of look around, see what works for us, what is contextual to St. Kitts and Nevis, and we sort of recommend those clear guidelines and standards as it relates to the minimum requirements for indoor air environments, both at home and more specifically in the business place.
Now, of course, enforcement is something that is a challenge here in St. Kitts and Nevis and across the Caribbean. Sometimes we put things on paper, but enforcing them becomes a challenge. And I want to talk to a bit more about how enforcement of the recommendations can be done here in St. Kitts and Nevis. But before we do that, we're going to take our final break.
Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus. We're here with discussion indoor air quality with Mr. Fassale and Dr. Roland, and they are both members of the Indoor Air Quality Policy Task Force that has been created by the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to address issues of indoor air quality. Now, I talked a bit about enforcement before we left, and the task force aims to recommend IAQ, and that would be indoor air quality standards and enforcement mechanisms. How will these standards be monitored? And what incentives are being considered for businesses to adopt these IAQ improvements?
Okay, Ian. We, as I mentioned previously, we are still at the infancy stages. We don't necessarily have all the answers as yet. As you know, when it comes to monitoring, and monitoring is a little easier. Enforcement is the difficult one. By the time the policy is completed, we would definitely have some form of a system in place, a mechanism to seek to enforce. Yeah. With regards to incentives, we are considering, for example, I spoke about it earlier, the possibility of creating perhaps tax breaks for individuals who want to align and sort of upgrade their environments as far as indoor air quality is concerned. So for example, we put in a list together of what is considered to be low VOC materials, right? So just to add some clarity and some context. So for example, when you go to shop for paints, there are different VOC ratings indicated on the paints. So for example, if one invests in paints that are more eco-friendly, then obviously there should be some sort of reprieve. There should be some form of tax break, you know, afforded to that individual. So top of my head, I could say that these are some of the areas where we're basically looking at providing or proposing some form of tax incentives yeah, for persons desirous. I think everybody should be desirous of having a cleaner, healthier indoor environment. Yeah.
And Dr. Roland, from your perspective as a medical professional, is there any recommendations that you have that you are making in the task force and the discussions? Because, of course, it's seen as preventative health. We always say that, saying that an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Anything in particular that you're looking at?
It's really just to improve the ventilation, and as Mr. Fassale highlighted, the LOVOX, in terms of monitoring, the Bureau of Standards actually has the capacity to monitor those pollutants, and they are accredited as well.
And that's an important service that I'm not sure that most persons are aware of. They think Bureau of Standards exists for government and for companies, but you can also access your services as individuals.
Yes.
Okay, so what milestones, Mr. Fassale, and of course you mentioned that the committee meets 2 times, and we appreciate it's in its infancy stages, but are there any milestones that have been achieved to date?
Well, I think the most significant milestone would be we have already drafted the framework for the policy document. The framework is very important because it really it sets the tone and structure to the document, making sure that it addresses the issues of the day as much as possible. So we do have that in place already. As the doctor mentioned earlier, we do have the formation of the subcommittees, and we're trying our best. We're all very busy individuals, and like I said earlier, we are scheduled to meet tomorrow for one such meeting.
Mm-hmm. Any key deliverables that have been developed or have been looked at?
Well, in a nutshell, again, I go back to the beginning. We intend to basically, or we will basically submit the draft policy document. But with that submission, it's also important to highlight the fact that we would need to provide sort of a roadmap. So, for example, we would submit this draft document, but it needs to be accompanied by a roadmap for implementation, because implementation is just as important as the document itself. And the issue of the public awareness and education campaigns is also ranks very highly in that regard. So, in my opinion, these would be the most significant deliverables that you should look out for.
Any timelines? I know it's always tricky to talk about timelines,
yes.
But is there an expectation as to when the policy should be completed by?
Yeah, I think we are looking at I think May or June. I can't necessarily. I don't necessarily have the information in front of me right now, but we are definitely on schedule, basically based on where we are today and what the CAPSEC would have outlined in the how should I put it, in the overall framework for the deliverables. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, you touched earlier on the diverse stakeholders that are represented on the task force, architects. Right. How will this collaboration ensure the policy that is being drafted addresses the needs of all communities, including rural areas and low-income households?
Well, the reality is we are a diverse task force. So the demographic that you spoke of is represented on the task force. You know, we come from various parts of St. Kitts and Nevis, and we do appreciate and understand the issues there. So at the least we can relate to our own circumstances, and we bring that to the task force. With that said, the whole idea again is to look at the whole public education campaign, and inform persons as to what we're doing. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, this program itself is basically geared to inform the public as to what it is that we're doing, and how the public is to benefit from this endeavor.
All right, and I'm sure there will be opportunities for the public to weigh in on the policy, and I suppose that is where the public awareness campaign comes in. Dr. Roland?
Yes, actually. We have a few ideas, working ideas, in terms of public awareness, such as radio broadcasts, infographics shared on social media. Everyone is using social media. School visits, partner with the NGOs and the community outreach, the community groups to reach out to the diverse communities. And I just want to add that it's not just adults or older children. We also really want to target the primary school kids as well, and somewhat create a culture of being more conscious of the air pollution, both indoor and outdoor, because at the end of the day, they are our future. So we want to instill that in them as well.
Will there be that opportunity for face-to-face public engagement, whether it be one-on-ones or town halls?
Yes, yes.
All right, and talk to us, Mr. Fassale, in terms about the importance of having that public awareness campaign, because of course you're the chair, and it's important for everyone to be aware of what's happening, as we mentioned earlier, the buy-in.
Right. Yeah, naturally, as you rightly said, it's extremely important that we connect with the public to inform them as to what we're doing, and of course the public gets an opportunity to sort of provide us information that can that can be beneficial to the drafting of the document itself. So this is an exercise that for now we're working within the quarters of our task force and our meetings, but by no means will it be it will be kept within the confines of those four walls. The whole idea is to be as inclusive as possible, to engage the public at the right time as we move forward.
Now, as there are a number of private stakeholders involved in the task force and would have contributed to the dialogue, are there any specific indoor air quality actions that can help to support green jobs, the creation of such energy efficiency or circular economy goals?
Could you repeat again? I didn't.
Are there any specific indoor air quality actions that also support green jobs, energy efficiency, or circular economy goals?
I am not. I haven't given this one much thought, except that I could say there is an opportunity, I think, for the local tech community. I think when we speak about the whole issue of monitoring and monitoring in particular, not necessarily enforcement, I think there is an opportunity for individuals to basically sort of look at how they can sort of be a part of the solution. I mean, we have the Robotics Association here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Who knows, we may just be in a position to design a device that can do a good job at monitoring indoor air quality spaces, and not just physical devices and physical items or objects, but again, one can look at designing infrastructures by way of software platforms that allows government agencies to more I would say accurately sort of monitor what is considered to be the quality of indoor environments, not necessarily throughout the entire island, but maybe perhaps the government buildings, the more institutional buildings are done.
Right, and there's of course an opportunity for persons who do flowers or plants to find out what these plants are and sell them to the public, to let them know, okay, well, there's a lot of talk about indoor air quality and we want to improve our indoor air quality, and so this plant is perfect for that.
Right.
I'm selling this plant at this. It's just a matter of being creative and filling the gaps that are there.
Right. Yeah, you're correct. You're correct. And in some measure, I think architects do have a role to play in sort of educating the public in terms of making them the most the most suitable decisions as far as it relates to indoor environments. And I also see an opportunity for example, the Ministry of Agriculture as well. They would interact very, very frequently with plants, and they would be in a position to perhaps educate the public on issues of suitability and plant selection and the likes.
Right, and I actually should have Googled that earlier in terms of to find out what plants and such would be best.
Well, there are
for
a few common ones. We know the snake plant is what is considered to be the snake plant. I'm sure you see it grows wild around St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a few in my office as well.
Oh, there you go. Perhaps that's something for you to consider, Dr.
Yes.
Roland. Yes, okay. All right. And so what messages, as we are almost out of time now, would you like to leave with viewers today to reassure them that indoor air quality is being taken seriously and that their health, Dr. Roland, and safety are priority of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis?
Okay, so let me go first. I think the fact that we do have in place the task force, I think the government has recognized that the elephant in the room needs to be addressed, and I think we actually in the right direction. In closing, I would like to bring to the attention of the public that, you know, we all have a stake in the quality of the indoor environments, because we do share a common outdoor environment. And in large measure, the quality of the indoor environments is basically, it is dependent as well on human behavior, whether it's through our actions or maybe our inactions as well. So I encourage the individuals out there, of the general public, as you rightly said, you mentioned Google. There's Google. Everything that we need right now, information is at our disposal. There are actionable steps that we can take today to basically improve our immediate indoor environments.
Okay. Just to add to Mr. Fassale's comments, the task force, we are very much committed to this through development of clear policies, regular monitoring, community education, and support for cleaner technologies. And just to emphasize as well as what Mr. Fassale said, we cannot do this alone. It is a collective effort, and we encourage everyone by staying informed. And I mentioned a few steps or tips to improve the indoor air quality. And together we can do this, we can breathe better. And clean air is not just a goal, it is a matter of, it's all our responsibilities to share.
Dr. Jazel, Roland, and Mr. Dexter Fassale, thank you so much for being with us for today's InFocus. We certainly would look forward to learning a bit more about the public awareness campaign when the time comes. We, of course, at SKNIS will commit to helping to promote the activities so that persons can be aware and some of the issues that come out of it as well too. And we look forward to that draft policy, I would say, in the third quarter. I know you mentioned around June, so certainly by the third quarter we can expect to have that draft policy. When it's completed, I imagine it goes to Cabinet.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
okay. And so we look forward to having an update on that when the time comes.
Certainly.
We certainly would like to thank you for being a part of our show today.
I thank you as well, Mr. Richards. All right.
Thank you for having us.
I would like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for being with us for today's edition of InFocus. We invite you to join us next week at the same place, at the same time. For now, it's InFocus, your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.